something wearing my father's face. A horror story. My name is Ryan Mercer. I'm 30 years old, and I grew up in Farmington, New Mexico, about 40 miles from the Navajo Nation. I say that because it matters. Where you grow up shapes what you're afraid of, and growing up that close to the reservation meant that certain stories got into you early, whether your parents intended them to or not. My dad worked construction. His crew had Navajo guys on it for years, good men, people he genuinely respected. I remember being maybe 9 years old and hearing one of them, a quiet man named Leonard, who always brought fry bread for the crew on Fridays. I remember hearing Leonard tell my dad that there were things you didn't talk about by name, things that listened for their own name being spoken. My dad nodded like he understood, and Leonard never said anything more specific than that, and I filed it away in the part of a child's brain that keeps the things adults won't fully explain. I'm explaining it now, or trying to. This happened 2 years ago, in late September. My dad had a piece of land out in the high desert, about 20 miles east of Shiprock. That's the volcanic rock formation that sits on the Navajo Nation like a broken cathedral, visible for 50 miles in every direction. He'd owned the land for 15 years, used it occasionally for weekend camping, nothing permanent. He called me in August and asked if I wanted to come out and help him put up a small structure, a cabin, nothing elaborate, somewhere to stay that wasn't a tent. I said yes. I had 2 weeks of vacation saved up and no particular plans, and honestly, I missed him. I'd been living in Albuquerque for 4 years by then, desk job, city life, and the idea of 2 weeks of physical work in the high desert with my dad sounded like exactly what I needed. I drove out on a Friday afternoon in late September. The landscape out there is something that's hard to describe to people who haven't seen it. Not the red rock arches of southern Utah, not the green mountains of the north. This is raw desert, the ground the color of rust and pale sand, the vegetation sparse and low, the sky enormous and the light almost aggressive in how honest it is. Nothing hides in that landscape. Everything is visible for miles. Or so I thought. My dad had already been there 3 days when I arrived. He'd set up a good camp, fire pit, cooking area, the materials for the cabin organized and ready. He looked well, happy actually, in the way he always was when he was out here, away from town and noise. We cooked dinner over the fire, talked about the project, talked about family. Normal, easy. I noticed he was quieter than usual, but I didn't think much of it. My dad had always had a quality of comfortable silence. He didn't talk to fill space, and I'd inherited that from him. After dinner, we sat by the fire for a while without talking much, and the desert night came down around us, and the stars out there in the absence of light pollution were extraordinary. The Milky Way clearly visible, the sky so full it felt close. Before we turned in, my dad said something that stuck with me. "Don't go out past the fire line at night," he said. I looked at him. Why? He was quiet for a moment, looking at the fire. "I've been hearing things at night. Probably coyotes, but stay close to camp." Probably coyotes. That qualifier, my dad was a man who said what he meant. If he thought it was coyotes, he would have said it was coyotes. The probably was doing a lot of work. I said okay. I went to my tent and went to sleep. The first 2 days of the build were good. Physical, satisfying work, setting the foundation posts, framing the walls. The kind of labor that uses your body completely and leaves your mind quiet. My dad was a skilled builder, patient and precise, and working alongside him had the comfortable rhythm of something we'd done since I was a teenager helping on his job sites. On the second night, I heard what he'd been hearing. It started around 2 in the morning. I was a light sleeper even before all this, and some sound pulled me up out of sleep. Not a sharp sound, not alarming exactly, just wrong. Wrong in the specific way that sounds are wrong, when they almost fit a category but don't quite make it. It was close to a coyote call. The frequency was right. The general shape of the sound was right. But coyotes have a quality of wildness to their calls, an abandon, a pack animal chaos that makes them sound like several voices in one. This was singular, considered, as though something was making the sound the way you make a sound when you're trying to make it convincingly, when you know what you're imitating but aren't quite right. I lay in the sleeping bag and listened. The sound moved around the perimeter of the camp, or something carrying the sound moved, circling slowly, staying outside the fire line. I couldn't see anything through the tent mesh. Just darkness and the dying glow of the fire coals. After maybe 10 minutes, it stopped. I lay awake for a long time, eventually slept. In the morning, I asked my dad how he'd slept. Fine, he said without looking up from the coffee he was making. He hadn't slept fine. I could see it in his face, but I didn't push. Day 4. My dad drove into Shiprock to get additional hardware we'd run short of. He'd be gone most of the day. The drive was 40 minutes each way, and he needed to stop at the lumber yard as well. I stayed at the site and worked on the interior framing, which was detail work I could manage alone. Around midday, I saw the dog. It was at the edge of my visual range, maybe 200 yards out, where the ground dropped into a shallow arroyo. A large dog, or something dog-shaped, standing still and watching the camp. Pale, almost white against the rust-colored ground. Too big for a coyote, wrong proportions for a wolf. Too heavy in the chest, too high at the shoulder. I watched it for a while. It didn't move. I went back to work. When I looked again, it was gone. An hour later, it was closer. 100 yards, maybe less, near a cluster of juniper scrub. Same stillness, same watching quality. I'm not a person who anthropomorphizes animals, but the attention of this thing was deliberate in a way that animal attention usually isn't. Most animals watch you as part of assessing a threat. They're gathering information, deciding whether to run. This felt like something past that decision. This felt like it had already decided something and was taking its time about it. I picked up a length of 2x4 and set it near where I was working. The dog, or the thing that was shaped like a dog, did not come closer. When my dad's truck came back up the access road around 4 in the afternoon, it was gone. I told my dad about it over dinner. He was quiet for longer than the story warranted. "What color?" he said. "Pale, almost white." Another silence. "Dad." "I saw it on the second day," he said. "Before you got here." He set down his fork. "I talked to Leonard last week, before I came out here." Leonard, the man from the construction crew. The one who'd told him years ago about things that listened for their own name. He told me that if I saw a white animal out here that didn't act right, I shouldn't look at it directly, and I shouldn't be outside alone after dark. I stared at him. "You knew, and you didn't say anything?" "I didn't want to worry you." "Dad, I didn't think it would..." He stopped, started again. Leonard told me something else. He said that if it came close to camp, and I heard it make a sound like something I knew, like something familiar, I shouldn't answer. Whatever it said, whatever it sounded like, don't answer. We sat with that for a moment. "What is it?" I asked. My dad looked at the fire. Leonard called it a yi-naudlushi, he said carefully, respecting the word, not throwing it around. A skinwalker, a witch who wears an animal's skin, who can look like an animal and sound like one, or, he paused, sound like a person. Sound like someone you know. The fire popped. The desert was dark and enormous around us. "We should leave," I said. "In the morning," he said. "We pack in the morning and we go." I don't know what woke me. It was deep night, the fire down to coals, the desert absolutely silent. The wrong kind of silence. The silence that's an absence rather than a presence. The silence of everything having gone quiet at the same time, because something has changed. And then my dad's voice from outside the tent. "Ryan, come out here. You need to see this." I sat up in the sleeping bag. His voice was slightly off, flat in the way. Voices are flat when someone is frightened, the emotion compressed out of the words. Or almost his voice, a voice that was performing being his voice with 95% accuracy, close enough that you'd never question it on a phone call, in a hallway, from the other room, but from inside a tent in the dead of night in the high desert, with Leonard's warning fresh in my mind. Close enough was not close enough. "Ryan, come out, just for a second." I didn't move. My heart was doing something that made it difficult to think. Leonard's words, "Don't answer. Whatever it says, whatever it sounds like, don't answer." "I can hear you're awake," said the voice that was almost my dad's voice. "Come look at the stars. It's worth it." Casual, warm, exactly the kind of thing my dad would say. An invitation to something ordinary, something shared, the kind of moment we'd had 100 times. And that was the most frightening thing about it. Not that it was wrong, but that it was so nearly right, that something had listened closely enough to know what my dad sounded like, what he would say, how he would say it. I pulled the sleeping bag up. I sat in the dark, and I did not make a sound. "Ryan!" The voice moved around the tent. I tracked it, on my left, then behind me, then on my right, moving slowly. Something was circling the tent the way the sound had circled the camp 2 nights ago. The same patient, deliberate movement. Then it stopped, right outside the tent door, and I heard breathing. Breathing with something off in the rhythm of it. Too slow, too deliberate. The breathing of something that has to think about the mechanics of breathing, rather than breathing naturally. "I know you're scared," said the voice. Still his voice, still almost right. "It's me. Come out." I closed my eyes. I pressed my back against the rear wall of the tent. I held my phone in my hand with my dad's number ready to dial. And I waited. The breathing continued. Then a new sound, underneath the breathing, layered below it. A sound I can only describe as a frequency the human voice shouldn't produce. Not an animal sound, not a human sound. Something between and below both. A vibration that I felt in my teeth and in the base of my skull that seemed to come from inside the tent rather than from outside it. I dialed my dad's number. It rang 1, 2, 3 times. The breathing outside the tent didn't change. The voice didn't say anything. 4 rings. 5. My dad picked up. Ryan, his voice from the phone, from wherever he was inside his tent 20 feet away. His real voice, thick with sleep, confused. What's wrong? What time is it? Are you in your tent? I said. My voice was barely a whisper. A pause. I heard him moving. Yeah, what's going on? Don't come out, I said. Are you zipped in? Ryan, you're scaring me. Are you zipped in? Yes, what? Don't unzip. Don't answer if something calls you. Stay where you are until it's light. A long silence, then quietly, okay. Outside my tent, the breathing stopped. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. A cleared silence, an aftermath like a room after the television has been turned off. Whatever had been there, the weight of it was gone. I could feel the absence, the way you feel a headache's absence after hours of pain. I stayed in the tent until the sky started lightening in the east. When I unzipped the door and stepped out into the gray pre-dawn, the camp was empty. The coals were cold. Nothing had been disturbed, except one thing. In the dirt outside my tent door, in the pale dust of the desert floor, there were prints. Large, inconsistent prints, starting as something that might have been an animal, 4-footed, heavy, and transitioning over the course of maybe 6 feet of ground into something 2-footed, human-shaped, and then nothing, as though whatever made them had simply stopped existing at that point in the desert. I photographed them with my phone before the morning wind disturbed them. My dad came out of his tent 20 minutes later. He looked at the prints without speaking. Then he started breaking down camp without eating breakfast, and I helped him, and we were packed and in the truck before 8 in the morning. We didn't talk much on the drive back, past Shiprock, the volcanic rock enormous against the pale morning sky, back onto the highway, back toward Farmington. About halfway home, my dad said, "It called you." Yes, using my voice. Almost, I said. Not quite. He nodded slowly, kept his eyes on the road. Leonard told me something else, he said after a while. He said these things, they can copy a voice, but they can't copy silence. A person you love, they'll be quiet with you. They'll let there be silence. He paused. Whatever was out there, it couldn't stop talking. It couldn't just be there. It had to keep speaking to draw you out. I thought about that. About the voice, the constant gentle pressure of it, the warmth it was performing without being able to actually produce it. It knew enough to use your voice, I said. It had been watching long enough, he said. Listening long enough. He was quiet for a moment. Ryan, don't tell people what it sounded like, the specific sounds it made. Leonard said, you don't describe those sounds. You don't repeat them. I haven't. This account describes everything except the specific qualities of the voice, the specific way it almost sounded like my dad. Some things, I've come to believe, are safer kept in the dark. We never went back to that land. My dad sold it the following spring to a developer who presumably knows nothing about what spent several nights circling the perimeter of a camp in the high desert. I hope they never find out. I still have the photographs of the prints. I keep them in a folder on my phone that I open sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, And I look at the transition from 4 feet to 2, from animal to something performing human. And I think about how close I came to unzipping that tent door. And I think about what Leonard said, that these things can copy a voice, but they can't copy silence. That love is quiet sometimes. That what almost fooled me was too insistent, too present, too desperate to be heard. The real thing doesn't need to convince you.